what's going on in the
Well,
room.
that's why I put it right in the middle next to my recorder.
Okay.
Generally, then that doesn't create a problem.
Okay,
So,
okay.
unless they just really want to see them.
Let's see. Should we start the meeting or wait till we get?
Do we know if Paul is coming?
After Easter, right, traffic.
I hadn't heard that Paul wasn't coming.
On the Pedro Park.
No, no, it's just,
Okay.
Hello.
I'm betting she's coming.
prosperous times, a lot of folks moving.
Morning.
Yeah.
I was just gonna call him, would you rather have him here or is the phone fine? Only because I need to tell him what to do.
I don't know that I have a preference. I don't know if there's any, benefit to one or the other.
Whether or not you all want to see his face.
As long as he can hear us via the phone, I don't know.
Sometimes I think that,
They said they were having some issues, so I.
oh, yeah, there's.
I got an idea if we're working.
I mean, that's what we talked about yesterday. And sometimes the visual can help.
Understood. And I'm happy to tell him, I think she already sent him a link.
The link's actually not working because we have another meeting in progress.
So never mind.
So,
How's the phone sound, everybody?
Sounds great.
Oh, yeah, he's gonna give us a new link. But we'll go ahead and start, the meeting started.
I'm not going to be able to show the meeting if I have to get the link and email it because I show my screen.
Good morning, we'll call the, firefighter pension board meeting to order for Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. First item on the agenda is the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item is open forum. Being a public meeting, opportunity for the public to speak. Anybody have anything? Thank you. So for, next item is approval of minutes dated January 16th. They're included in the agenda packet.
Motion approved.
Okay, second. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next is presentation of the actuarial evaluation report.
Madam Chairman, if I may, I couldn't quite hear. Who made the second? I apologize. You did.
I think that
I heard the first, I just didn't hear the second. Okay, thank you.
They were calling in to Chuck Farmer.
Yep, I will call him right now.
Are we able to pull the evaluation report up?
Hey Chuck, this is Jeremy. I'm here with the Oldsmar Fire Pension Board, and they are ready for you to go over their actuarial evaluation with you.
Oh, okay, I actually clicked on a link that, Amy had sent me, but let me.
Yeah, it's not working, so we're just, we're gonna have to go with the phone.
That explains why I was sitting here just circling. All right, good morning, everyone. The report that I'm gonna go over is the October 1, 23 actuarial evaluation, and as you recall, we do these, evaluations once each year. The main point of the evaluation is to determine what the required contribution is for the current fiscal year. So this report was prepared as of 10/1/24. and benefits based on that most recent pay, then all the projections go up. The liabilities go up, the projected benefits go up, and so forth by a proportionate amount. So you'll see in a minute that does drive up the required contribution on a dollar basis. I'm just going to touch on the assets. As I said a minute ago, there's Jeremy has a lot more up-to-date information with respect to the trust fund assets because this report stops as of 10/1 of last year. Our market value return last year was 8.33%, which was good. That was definitely nice to have a positive return. The year prior, of course, was the year when we had over a 13% loss. But we don't use the straight market value for determining the required contribution. We're using what we call a 5-year smoothing method or a phase-in method. What we do is we look at the amount of the investment gains and losses, not above and below zero, but above or below the assumed return. So in this case, 6.75%. So if we made, let's just say 8.75% instead of the 6.75%, then what we would be phasing in is the extra 2% that we earned in that particular year above the 6.75%. Likewise, when you look at year before last, when we had that 13.3% loss, we were assuming 6.75%. So we actually had, if you look at the difference between those two, it is a little over 20% of the market value. So we have a really, we kind of dug a really big hole. Hold on a second. Sorry, I have another call coming in, and I just want to make sure that I hadn't lost you guys. You guys are still there, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So anyway, so for year before last, we had a just over a 20% shortfall in the earnings, and that's a big deep hole to try to get out of. It's going to probably take us a few years to kind of climb out of that. So I don't know if you have the reports in front of you. If you want to look at table 2-A, Roman numeral 2A, it's on page Roman numeral 2-1 in my report, but I know sometimes the meeting packets are numbered a little differently, so I'm not sure if you have the same page numbering that I do.
It'd be, I can see 2A.
And this table, by the way,
in
is
your
called
packet.
Actuarial Value of Assets.
Yes, we have it.
Okay, you guys found it?
It's on the screen.
Okay. At the top of that page, you'll see in the box, this shows you the amount of the gains and losses, I should say the unexpected gains and losses, that we are not yet recognizing. So when you do the arithmetic, I won't bore you with the year-by-year details, but when you do the arithmetic and put it all together, as of 10/1/23, we still have almost $600,000 of unexpected net loss that we are ignoring. So if you look kind of in the middle of the page, you'll see that we had the market value of $8.38 million as of 10/1/23, and then I'm going to add back to that the $581,000 of loss that we are temporarily not going to recognize. We're going to pretend it didn't happen or it wasn't there. There's another small adjustment here. You'll notice it says minus advance employer contribution. It's really not worth talking about because the dollar amount is so small, but it's a little over $5,000 of advance contribution credit that the city has with the plan. This is the extent to which, and it could be the prior year, it could be the prior several years, but it's the extent to which the city has deposited more into the plan than was required. So when that happens, and it does happen from time to time, we don't just throw the extra money away. We actually give the city a credit for the overpayment, and then that credit is something that's available for the city to use, whether it's in the current year or any future year. It can use that at a time of its choosing to reduce what it would otherwise have to contribute. So it's kind of like a prepaid employer contribution. Again, the dollar is very small, a little $5,000, which is really negligible. when you have over 8 million or almost 9 million of assets. But anyway, when you do the math, then my actuarial value as of 10/1/23 is $8.96 million, which is obviously still above. We've had 2 years now where or actually 3 years, I think, where the actuarial value has exceeded the market value. That's not a typical situation. Usually, in the vast majority of years, the actuarial value will lag the market value, and that's simply because we typically would expect to have more gains than losses. At least we hope so. But just because of the magnitude of the loss year before last and just kind of where things have fallen, we have had 3 years now when the actuarial value has exceeded the market value. However, if you look at it, what you'll notice is, for example, at 10/1/22, the actuarial value exceeded the market value by about $800,000 roughly, and now we're exceeding it by about less than $600,000. So what we'd expect to see is over the next few years, the actuarial value will grow closer and closer to the market value until, assuming we have more gains than losses over the next few years, then we should end up a few years from now back in the situation where the actuarial value lags. Sometimes it's a little unnerving, especially if you're a participant, to think that the funding of the plan is based on an actuarial value that's not, that greatly exceeds what we had in place as of 10/1/23. But that's the way the methodology works. And of course, the purpose of this is to try to bring some smoothing to the required contribution, so that we don't, have 1 year when the contribution rate goes way high, and then another year when it plummets. That's really bad for budgeting purposes. So we try to bring a little more stability to the contribution rate, and that's the reason for doing that. Any questions so far on what I've discussed before we move to the bottom line?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Terry Power. The 6.75% assumed return, who sets that? Is it global?
The pension board sets it based on the advice of both your actuary and your investment consultant.
Got it.
So but it is technically a pension board decision. Typically, the pension board, will follow the recommendation of the actuary and the investment consultant, but you're certainly not required to do that.
Yep, it's very reasonable. Thanks.
Any other questions before we move on? Not hearing any. Okay. Well, if you want to turn all the way back to Table 1A, this is labeled Minimum Required Contribution. It's page Roman numeral 1-1 in the report. At the top, you'll see a bar that is a bar graph that just represents, based on the current projected benefit liability, where the funding is going to come from. So you look at the dark blue part of that bar, that's kind of where we stand right now at actuarial value, not market, but actuarial. Then there's a lighter blue color section that shows you the estimated dollar amount of the employer's contribution for 23-24. And then the green part is future employer funding. And then finally, there's a narrow yellow bar which represents the employee contributions from this point forward. And of course, all those this is just an expectation based on the assumptions we make. At the very bottom of the page, you'll see what our required contribution rate is for the current year. That's 71.43% of pensionable earnings. This is the percentage that gets applied to the pensionable payroll, not necessarily total payroll, but the pensionable earnings, because there are typically some components of pay that are not included as being pensionable. Most notably in Florida, state law limits the amount of overtime that can be included in pensionable earnings. If we turn over to the next page, this is the second page of Table 1A, and it has two pie charts on it. The one in the middle of the page is bolder in color than the one at the bottom of the page. So the bottom of the page, the lighter colored pie, shows you the breakdown of the contribution for last fiscal year. So last year, based on the chapter money that we received, that we were allowed to use all of it, the chapter money worked out to be a little over 15% of payroll. The employees contribute 5%, of course, and then that left the city with a contribution just under 40% of payroll for last year. When you move up to the pie in the middle of the page, the darker colored pie, that is an estimate for the current year. And the reason it's an estimate, there are two reasons for that. Number one, we don't know for sure at this point what our pensionable earnings will be for the current year. We also don't know what the chapter money, the dollar amount of the chapter money will be, because we don't get that until sometimes usually late in the summer. So we have two unknowns. These percentages you see here are estimates based on what we expect to happen. Of course, the employee contribution rate is fixed at 5%, so that number is solid. But the other two, the city contribution percentage and the chapter contribution percentage, are both estimates. The total still has to add between those two. We'll have to add to 71.43%. But if we get more chapter money than is expected, or if payroll ends up being smaller than expected, we'll get a bigger percentage over on the chapter side, which means we, by definition, will get a smaller percentage on the city side. And conversely, if we don't get as much chapter money as we think, or if the payroll pensionable earnings for the current year ends up being more than what we are expecting, then that chapter percentage would fall, and that would leave a bigger percentage, a bigger portion, I should say, of the 71.43% required contribution for the city to cover. But based on the estimates, we're expecting the city to be obligated to deposit 55.42% of pensionable earnings in the current year, and the chapter money we expect will cover just over 16%. But again, those percentages are going to, the break point between those two items, the city contribution and the chapter contribution, that break point is likely to change, because things rarely work out exactly how we expect. Let me scroll down to one other thing I wanted to point out. Before I go there, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but I meant to. The estimated dollar amount of the total contribution requirement from the employer. Now, this includes both chapter money as well as the city contribution. It excludes what employees are expected to contribute. So the employer side contribution is estimated for the current year based on estimated payroll. It's estimated to be $521,000. Now, last year we got over $100,000 of chapter money. If we get that again, let's just say we got $121,000, and the estimates all turn out to be correct, then that would leave about a $400,000 contribution that the city would have to make for the current year. But again, that number, like these others, is subject to change depending on exactly how things shake out with respect to pensionable earnings, as well as with respect to the chapter contribution. The last thing I wanted to point out before I open it up for questions again is, you don't have to turn to the page, but our funded percentage, I try to de-emphasize this particular statistic, because I don't think it's of too much importance. I think a lot of people pay too much attention to this, but I point it out usually every year when I go over the valuation report, because it is something that people do tend to look at. Our funded percentage is just under 102% funded, which is good. It's good to be over 100%. That usually begs the question, though, if we're over 100% funded, why do we have any required contribution at all? And the answer to that is, this 102% funded percentage is based on the accrued benefits, not projected benefit liability, but the accrued benefit liability. One way you can think of this particular statistic is, theoretically, had we shut the plan down last October 1st and just said we're not going to have a pension anymore, we're going to give everybody a lump sum settlement that's equivalent to the actuarial value of their benefit that they've earned to date. We'll do that for retirees, actives, everybody. If we had gone through that exercise, theoretically, we would have had almost 2 cents left over for every dollar of benefit liability we paid out. Now, if we were allowed simply to fund the plan on an accrued benefit basis, then truly we would not have a required contribution for this year. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on your perspective, we are required to fund the plan on a projected benefit liability basis. So on a projected basis, we obviously do have some unfunded liability, and that's where the contribution requirement comes from. But the fact that we're over 100% funded with respect to accrued benefits means that every dollar of contribution coming into the plan, at least for right now, is being spent on current and future benefit accruals. It's not paying for past service benefits or past service liability. Sometimes we refer to that as the baggage that a plan might have. There are a lot of pension funds out there that have some degree of baggage from the past. They haven't yet paid for the benefits that people have earned, never mind the projected benefits. So it's a really good situation to be in, from my perspective, that all of our contribution dollars are paying for current and future benefit accruals, and we don't have any baggage from the past. Now, we could create baggage again if we had a year when, the asset performance is low enough, or if we have a big loss, we could, we would see that funded percentage drop, and we could certainly get back to a situation where we're under 100% funded. But usually that would only happen if we had a really bad year, with our assets. Otherwise, we're in good shape. And by the way, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but let me point this out because it is important in this case. This 101.85% funded percentage, the 102 funded percentage, it's based on the market value, not that actuarial value. So it's actually based on a lower asset value than what we're using for funding, which is good because it means that if we're, just almost 102% funded on the market value, and the market value, of course, fully reflects that loss from year before last, that's really good to know. That means in spite of that loss, we still are over 100% funded. If we use the actuarial value for this statistic, of course, we'd be something much larger than 102%. But that, to me, would be a little misleading because obviously we didn't actually have the almost $9 million in the fund as of 10/1/23 that I'm pretending we had for funding purposes. So anyway, that's probably way more than you want to know about the funded percentage, but usually, like I said, it's something people are interested in, that one statistic. Funded percentages, by the way, I'm just sharing my opinion with you, and I'm sure I've done this before. Don't put too much faith in that particular statistic because there are plans that are brand new that are very healthy but could be way under 100% funded simply because they're brand new plans. Likewise, you could have a plan that's been around for decades that is over 100% funded, but it may be headed for trouble if the contribution is not going to be enough to fund the future benefit liability. So, again, don't place too much importance on that one statistic. All right, with that, I'm going to be quiet, and I'll open it up to any questions that you guys have.
Hello, this is Steve Ham. Thank you for the detailed numbers. In your present value calculation, what percent did you use of benefits for your net present value percent, and how many years out did you go?
Well, we go all the way out in that present value of future benefit liability, which, by the way, is shown on table 1D, as in dog. It is almost $11.13 million in total. You'll see how, if you look at that table, you'll see how it breaks out between the active participants and what we call deferred vesteds and retirees and so forth. But we actually go all the way to as long as each participant will live. So our projections not only go to the point of retirement, but they go to the, if you looked at it, whoever was our youngest participant, it's for the rest of their life. Our mortality tables do go all the way out to age 110. So that means that we are, even though the liability for people once they get, above the age of 85 or 90 is pretty small, especially on a discounted basis, because there's not a huge chance that, people are going to make it to be 95 or 100 or 105. But we do technically carry each person out to age 110. So it is a, think of it as a full lifetime projection of the benefit that we expect to pay to folks. Obviously, once someone reaches the age that they're eligible to retire, and we assume that they retire, then we wouldn't be adding to their benefit dollar amount at that point. They would simply be, being paid their pension at that point. So the pension liability typically increases for somebody who's actively working. if you graphed for an individual, kind of graphed what their projected liability would look like, it would grow and grow and grow, and it would grow fairly quickly as they get close to retirement age. Once they actually retire, then it begins to fall, and it falls then over the remainder of their life. Did that answer the question? I may have misunderstood your question, but
So there's no discount percentage or net present value percentage associated with those future benefit amounts?
it is. These are discounted numbers. So, for example, if we were going to pay a $100 benefit a year from now, we're not going to add $100 to projected liability. We're going to add, $93, $94. It's going to be discounted back at that 6.75% interest or discount rate. So the 11.13 million figure is a discounted. It is an actuarially calculated number, and it is a discounted value.
Okay, great. That was my question.
That was yours. Okay, I'm sorry. I ended up answering the wrong question, but
Nope, you're good. And then while we're in for questions, this is a question for city staff. The 12.5% increase in payroll, some part of that was promotion, some part of that was raise. Does anybody know what that breakdown is, promotion versus raise? And it's not an immediate, it can be a
Yeah,
follow-up.
we can get that for you.
Okay.
There was a new contract that was implemented with the firefighters, between the firefighters and the city.
Okay.
We can certainly get the breakdown for that, and we'll send it out to the board.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a couple. Terry Power. Again, I know it's in the plan document. Is there a lump sum option for a person when they've attained full retirement age, or are the benefits always going to be paid directly from the plan?
I'm looking at that right now. We do list the benefit options typically in the plan outline. Let me see. Oh, for some reason, I don't see the options listed here. I apologize. Normally, we have the benefit options listed. Oh, there they are, formal
Yeah,
payment.
they are.
Let me just scan the list quickly and see. I don't see a lump sum option for this plan. No, sir. It looks like the options are all annuities. Obviously, you can choose to have it guaranteed for a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. You can choose to have a part of your benefit go to a joint annuitant. Typically, that would be a spouse. There is an automatic, I'm sorry, I apologize. This plan does have an actual lump sum distribution. It was on the next page. It's at the top of, if you go to page Roman numeral 5-3, the options start on 5-2 at the bottom in item 7, form of payment, but then at the top of the next page, actual equivalent single lump sum distribution, it's automatic if the value is less than $5,000, which it never is, or if the monthly benefit is less than $100, which it never is. But yes, you do have, I apologize, you do have a lump sum option, so someone can take the actual value of their benefit when they reach the point of retirement.
Interesting. And I assume they would probably require spousal consent.
It does not.
Really?
For a private plan that's covered by ERISA, you're absolutely right. A private plan, because ERISA would require spousal consent for a participant to take the lump sum. That's simply because under federal law and under ERISA, a spouse has at least a 50% right. In other words, they have a right to at least to receive at least 50% of the participant's pension after participant's death for the rest of the spouse's life. But this is, of course, a public sector plan, and you guys are exempt from ERISA. So, and Florida state law does not, which is what governs our plan, Florida state law, it does not require spousal consent to receive any of the options, including the lump sum.
Sure. And just as a background to ERISA, if you take a lump sum distribution years ago, let's say an Army pension, you retire and you take a lump sum and you're married to your spouse for 30 years and you elect a life-only annuity and then you die the next month, your spouse is left with nothing. That's a problem. Right. So is there something, is that a protected benefit, or in theory could the plan be amended to require a spousal waiver if the retiree is married at the time they accrue the benefit?
I don't know. That would be a legal question, of course, for legal counsel. I will give you a non-legal opinion, which is, generally speaking, I think you could probably do that on a go-forward basis. In other words, for benefits accrued after a certain date.
Sure.
But I don't know that you could add another, let's say, restriction or requirement to the benefits that have already accrued.
Right.
And that's because we all commonly understand that once somebody earns a certain dollar amount of benefit, we can't take that dollar amount away. But in addition to that, the rights and the features that go with that dollar amount of benefit are generally protected as well. So for example, you could say, well, let's have a delayed retirement age going forward. Well, you could do that. I've had a few plans that have done that, but you couldn't change the eligible retirement age with respect to benefits earned up to the date of the change.
Sure.
So my non-legal, just actuarial opinion is you probably could add that requirement, but only on future accruals. But to get a real answer, you would need to consult with legal counsel.
Sure. Exactly. And just two other quick ones. Current market value, I'm always going to ask where the assets at today. Do you have a number? Or look at it
We'll
from
cover that
Okay,
momentarily.
cities will do that. And as far as performance versus other plans of similar size, how, I know 22-23 was an anomaly, obviously, but how does, historically, I guess even looking back 5 years, how is the performance from what you see of the Oldsmar plan versus other similar size programs?
You guys pretty much fall in line. Now, part of that is because you are part of the FMPTF. So you are, by definition, you're earning, you as a pension board, you guys are not making specific investment decisions beyond whether you want to be 50%, 60%, or 70% in equities. So you're part of this very large pooled pension trust fund that earns, frankly, I think probably does a little better over time if you looked at it. I don't have the numbers specifically, but I suspect, based on casual observation over the years, that being a part of, generally speaking, large pension funds tend to do better than small pension funds performance-wise, and that's simply because a lot of times they can afford to take a little more risk. A lot of times they have access to maybe a little bit better investment advice or counsel than maybe a little tiny plan doing everything on its own would have. So I would say that just based on those points, that you guys probably perform, at or above the average for a Florida public plan.
Got it.
Jeremy, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but
I can address that. I'll go over in another report. I can point to some data.
okay.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chuck, I just had a couple questions. The supplemental GASB report, is that considered part of the actual variable valuation?
Well, it's a supplement to the valuation. So, of course, the supplement would be, in other words, for this report, the funding valuation reports are issued each year as of the beginning of the year. The GASB reports come along later because they are issued as of the end of the year. So here we have an October 1, 23 funding valuation, which is the report we've been going over, of course. And then once this current fiscal year closes out, there will be a September 30th, 24 GASB report that will be based on this same 10/1/23 valuation and data and so forth. So GASB is an end of year. So I guess the point is the GASB report that is associated with this funding valuation will not be issued until after the close of the year, once we know what the assets are as of September 30th of 24.
Okay. I did have a question, though, on page, it doesn't have page numbers on it, so it's my page.
Oh, you're looking at, let me switch on my screen. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me just switch because it sounds like you are looking at the GASB report. Let me get this a little bit bigger on my screen so I can see it. So you're looking at the GASB supplement as of September 30, 23?
Yes.
Okay, I got you. I've got it up now. Go ahead.
It's my page 49, projection of fiduciary net position.
Yes.
So it shows the contributions stopping in October of 30. Does that mean that the intention would be we have all of our future accrued benefits in the plan?
Yes, that's correct. That is the date, and that was actually a different thing that I just opened up. Yes, so this is just an exercise we have to go through that GASB requires. It doesn't, please don't pay too much attention to it, because it's just saying if the assets of the plan earn going forward our assumed rate, which in this case for GASB is still 7%. So if they earn 7% per year going forward, if benefit payouts are year by year, exactly what we expect based on these actuarial assumptions, if administrative expenses are, have the growth that we project here, which is about a 3% growth typically per year, if all of that, pans out, then we have contributions, and we start with the required contribution based on last year's information, and we inflate it 4.5% per year going forward. It's just saying on that basis, yes, by the time we get to by the time we get to the 30-31 fiscal year, no more contributions will be required. But the fact is that, that's just it. We have to do this exercise in order to, I guess, prove or show that there is no, what GASB calls a crossover point. There's no point at which the assets will run out with respect to current participants. So when we do that projection, we're allowed to include future contributions we expect to come in, and this is both from the employer, by the way, employer and employee. It's total contributions from all sources. But we're allowed to project those, which we do here in this particular table. And then on that basis, we're just saying the plan, we're demonstrating that the plan is never expected to run out of money and to have enough money for the current group of participants, until that last individual passes away. And in fact, what it shows, if you look at the very bottom of that table, which I think is on the next page, you'll see we're expecting to end up with about $10 left over after we're done paying everybody off. That would be as of October 1, 2089. So it's just a run out of the benefit payments and so forth, but it really doesn't mean a whole lot, because, it's certainly once you get more than a couple of years out, these projections start to be kind of worthless.
It's a little more theory. Okay.
Yeah, it's just theory. Like I said, the main purpose of this is to demonstrate that the plan is not expected to run out of money.
Okay.
Now, if we were not in Florida, if we were in some other states that don't have contribution requirements the way Florida does for public sector plans, then a plan could theoretically be expected to run out of money, because there might not be any mechanism in place to require the employer to put more money into the plan. And so so that would be an example where this type of an exercise might show something very different. But by definition, for Florida public plans, because we do have Chapter 112 that does require the city to step up to the plate and make the contributions that are required each year to keep the plan funded and healthy, then we should never have a situation where a Florida public plan runs out of money.
Okay. And I think my other question was about, there was a change in the contribution rate due to essentially age of the participants.
Well, yeah, you're right, the demographic experience.
Yes.
You're looking back at the funding evaluation now on Table 1C, gain and loss analysis?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we didn't go over this specifically, but this is the normal cost rate. By the way, it's slightly less than the contribution rate because it does not reflect interest adjustments and all that good stuff. But the rate went up by about 40% in very rough terms. 40 to 45% of our increase in the rate was attributable to investment shortfalls, and that's simply the fact that we're still phasing in that really bad year before last. and then about the other 55% plus was due to demographic experience. Demographic experience is everything from, yes, in this case it probably is largely driven by those bigger than expected pay increases, but it can be other things too. It could be that we had fewer retirements than we expected. It could be that people, we do have, it sounds morbid, but we have an expected number of deaths each year, based on our mortality tables. And if people survived at a greater rate than we expected from one year to the next, that would tend to drive the cost up, albeit by a really, really small amount. So yes, that's a catch-all bucket. That's all non-investment experience, which by definition means it's coming from the participant side of the equation. But I suspect the biggest single factor in that was the large pay increase in the last year.
Okay, so that does include pay increases as well? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions for Chuck? All right, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate your time.
Okay, well, before I go, you guys are not obligated to do this at today's meeting by any means, but if you're happy with the report, this report technically is a draft until such time as the pension board formally accepts it or approves it. Once that happens, once it has been officially approved by the board, then it becomes the real deal. In essence, it becomes an invoice to the city for the fiscal year. And also then under state law, we have 60 days to file this report with the state Division of Retirement. We take care of that on our end as the actuaries for the plan, so you guys don't have to worry about that. But I don't know if you guys are inclined to approve the report today or if you'd like to wait until a later meeting to do that. But
typically, we have in the past approved it. Did you?
So I have a couple more questions, but
Okay.
I don't disagree with approving it at the meeting. First question is, on some of the graphs, we've got 5-year age buckets
yes,
and 5-year years of service buckets.
yes.
Given the number of participants, would it be possible to look at the table and the graphs in a little more, there's 9 people. Is there any way that we could look at them with a little more granularity to give us a better expectation as to who's zeroing in on the 55 to 59, so we can look at who's, and not who individually, but who as an age is getting close to that retirement. I also suspect that with firefighters, there's certain, it's a very physical job, and go ahead.
Yes, and so I have 2 answers for you that are completely opposite each other. Yes, theoretically we could do that. We have the information available to do that. As a practical matter, we would have to go in and change the report software and all that. It would be a big deal to do that because these graphics are standardized. They're part of the software that we use to do the valuation. So yes, I could do that, but it would be rather time consuming, and I'm not sure that it would be worth the effort. When you have only 9 people, I would assume that most of you guys, and certainly on the city and the HR department, at least, they're going to be aware of the specific age for each person. And, you as a board, the point of these tables, and by the way, we call these age and service distributions because, as you pointed out, it has 5-year buckets of age and service. The service we have under 1 year and then 1 to 4. And then the others are 5 years. So it's just to give you a feel for if you have a big bubble of people over the next few years that are becoming eligible. It's not really intended to let you know, hey, in the next year we've got, 2 people who could potentially retire. But like I said, presumably the city at least knows that because they have all that information. I have the information too. It's just that to show it in a graphic like this, we could, outside of that, because there's only 9 people, I could easily send you a list of their ages in service. That would be easy to do.
So let
But
me
to try
tell
to
you-
put in a graphic would be a little more challenging.
So let me tell you why I'm concerned.
Okay.
So right now, a lot of our assumptions based on how much these funds are going to make, we always say, we're going to catch up, we're going to catch up, right? Well, in our particular instances, we have our 9 individuals, they're pretty far along in their years of service in a very physical and demanding job.
Right.
So our expectation of this 7% return that we're going to make over time, don't worry, we're going to catch up, we're going to catch up. We're going to be having firefighters coming up for retirement, and based on the graph that I'm looking at, it's probably a reasonable expectation that most of your firefighters will retire between 60 and 65 because of the physical nature of the work.
Yeah.
So looking at it, you know, the yellow and the green leads me to believe that in the next 5 years, half of our eligible firefighters may be accessing their retirement. Now, when you look at our investments are structured for someone that's 20, 30 years old. So I see a huge mismatch between the age of our firefighters and how close they are to retirement and what our investments are in. So, I know it's, in our particular case, we have a very unique situation in that we only have 9 people, but their years of service and their age is skewed closer to retirement. So for instance, and I'll just give you a personal example. I'm 64 years old, 63, and I would not touch real estate with a 10-foot pole because that's a long-term investment. I am retired, but if I'm 58, I want to be ratcheting down the risk level of my investments. And based on current interest rates on government debt, there's some very good alternatives as opposed to the yo-yo that we've seen in the last 5 years over, you know, what the fund's made in money and what they haven't. So that's why I'm asking for the detailed breakdown, and I'll put that out to city staff then, because I know.
Well,
I can get it,
I mean, I can, it's only 9 people, so I can give it to you right now if you want. While you were discussing.
Yeah, if you could send
your
that in,
concerns,
if you could.
So if you want, let me just give you, and I'm going to go
Chuck,
by
Chuck.
decreasing age.
Chuck, if you could just send us a quick email, that way we've got it as a
I
record.
can send you an
that would be
email.
great.
Yeah,
very
that's
quickly.
great.
I'll send you an email.
Send
Like
it
I said,
to-
it'll take 3 minutes, if that, 2 minutes.
Chuck, send it to me
Let
and I'll
me point
get it
out,
to
though,
him.
to address your concern, if you can go back to table 1A in the report, that bar graph, I touched on it when we were looking at table 1A, page Roman numeral 1-1. So look at, this is sometimes we call this a kind of a funding timeline, is another way to look at it. But visually, if you look at the magnitude of the current year's expected contribution, which is over $500,000 from the employer, you look at the future employer funding, and granted, this is it's a discounted value, but it's not discounted that much, 1.78 million. What that means is we are actually funding this plan. We expect to have the plan funded within the next several years. Our funding timeline is very short for this plan. That's by definition. The cost method that we use automatically funds the plan over the working life of each person. So, in other words, if we had a group of 9 people who were all expected to retire in 1 year from now, then we would have only a 1-year funding period for the plan. And for that 1 year, we might have a really high required contribution rate, but then we would expect the contribution rate to be 0 after that. So in your case, and the reason I pointed you back to this particular bar graph, is you look at the size of the light blue section, which is the 23-24 employer contribution, as compared to the green future employer funding. If we were looking at a more typical plan, we would see a much larger green portion relative to, and we'd see a little skinny light blue portion. So, because we'd be funding the plan over a number of years. But in your case, built into the numbers is this goal, if you will, for lack of a better word, of having the plan fully funded on a projected benefit basis, having it fully funded by the time that last of these 9 individuals reaches retirement. And we are funding it over future payroll, which means if we have out of the 9, let's say 2 were eligible to retire a year from now, once they drop out, so we would greatly ramp up the funding for the next year. Then once those 2 people dropped out, our funding levels should fall somewhat proportionate and so forth. So in other words, it's not a linear decline. It is actually the contribution requirement would be expected to drop in proportion to however many people and, whatever their individual benefit levels are relative to everybody else as they retire. So, or as they sort of drop out of the active group. So that is, and I'm not trying to minimize your concern because it is a valid concern, but it hopefully will help you feel a little more comfortable to know that we're not just picking up, a 10 or 20 year funding period and saying, well, let's just do level contributions over that period. We are funding this plan over a relatively short time horizon, which is in fact how we get to an over 70% of pay contribution requirement. Because if we had, new people coming into the plan and so forth, that percentage would no doubt be a lot lower. Now, to address on the investment side, and Jeremy can address this better than I can, there are, and I think right now you guys are in the 60% portfolio. You could at some point decide to go to that 50% equity portfolio, which would be a little more conservative. And at some point the board may decide that that's an appropriate move. And I hate to talk too much about investments because, frankly, I don't know that much about investments. But Jeremy can address it much better than I can. But Jeremy, do you have any thoughts on that as far as ways that they can be a little more conservative in how they're invested?
Not without a longer conversation, so I'll probably let you finish your part, and then I'll see where they want to go with that conversation, because it could be a couple minutes or it could be longer. So
that really is my comments on the concern. Again, I'm not trying to minimize the concern at all. Typically, what we do see when funds are frozen to new participants, and especially for funds that consist only of retirees, then typically we do see the trustees begin to pull back and become more conservative, to invest more conservatively. But it's what you as an individual might do with retirement is going to be very different than what a pooled pension fund would do, and especially a pension trust fund will do, because the risk is pooled across multiple participants as opposed to just you as an individual. So certainly you as an individual, when you're reaching close retirement, you're right, you wouldn't be taking undue risk with your retirement investments at all.
So my concern is that we keep saying pool as though we have 90,000 employees in this, and we have 9. Okay, so we can be very specific.
But the FMPTF has thousands.
Okay,
thousands.
So I understand, and if this were IBM, agree with you 100%. Given that it's only 9 people, I think that we can be very specific to their needs and their specific situation relative to our investment strategies, as opposed to our current allocation assumes everyone's in their 30s and we've got 10 years for the stock market to make their adjustments, and it's going to average out.
Right.
I'm not so sure we do. That's my point. I'm not so sure we do.
I got you.
And if our firefighters were having desk jobs, right, there wasn't the exposure to disability, there wasn't the exposure to the requirement, I think, for EMTs is to be able to carry 70 pounds. I don't know if it's 100 pounds for firefighters, but there's definitely a physical aspect to this job that I think just as responsible as we're looking out for their benefits, we just need to look at this. The second thing I have for you is inactive participants. We have some data for them. what is an inactive participant?
We do. If you look over, let me see, over here. Well, the information we have, aside from the type participant they are, so there's quite a bit of information in general back in the data part of the report. But as you said, 9 active participants. We have 3 retirees, so 3 individuals right now who are actually drawing a monthly pension. One of them is a regular service retirement, one is a disability retirement, and one is the beneficiary, surviving beneficiary of someone who has passed away. We have 1 deferred vested individual, which is someone who is they were vested. They're not employed anymore by the city. They're somewhere else now, but they're also not yet eligible for retirement, but they are vested. So once they reach the right age, then they will they'll be able to start. They'll go into payment status. 4 of our participants out of the 17 are simply due a refund of their contributions, so they're not even vested. All we owe them is just a refund of their own money, which is very small. So as far as the age at retirement, that's the other statistic
Chuck,
we have.
that's okay.
Yeah.
They're
It's all this is in the
inactive.
back in the data section of the report.
They're inactive contribution participants, meaning
I'm sorry,
that
say it again.
they're inactive participants in that they're not they're not contributing as employees to the plan.
That's correct.
Okay, good.
That's
Got
correct.
it. The next thing I got for you is 6.5 months seems like a long time between when this report, the data on this report seems awful old to me. Is there any way we can get it sooner, like 3.5 months?
We do have a few of the FMPTF plans that get their reports in. The earliest is probably early December, so the answer is yes. You just have to make sure that you're in the front of the line, which means that you submit the data as quickly as possible after the close of the year. You submit the data to the league, who is the plan administrator, of course, and then we generally do these reports. I won't say there's never an exception, because we certainly do make exceptions sometimes, but generally we prepare these reports in the order in which the data is submitted, and so you can kind of get, there's a line, I'm sure you understand, because 95% of the plans we work with have an October 1 fiscal year. So from the period about November-ish through early spring each year, we are slammed. It's kind of like accountants and tax season. And so it's really just, where you fit in the line. If a plan, I don't remember when this particular report was issued. I worked with too many plans to, this one looks like early March. So based on that, I would say you guys probably got your data in maybe in December-ish. Just looking at that, maybe November, December. There's usually a 2 to 3 month lag time between when data is submitted and when the reports are issued. That's not true on the front end, because like I said, we do have a few that we're able to get their reports issued, and we start issuing these reports in early December. So just make sure going forward, if that is a concern, that you get your data in right after the close of the year, and make sure you're right up there at the front of the queue, and then you could get it as early as December.
Thank you, Chuck. Is there a cost with being early?
No.
There is no cost. No. The fee schedule's the same whether you're earlier or late.
Okay. Is there an issue with the city staff on getting it done sooner? Or what are the challenges that the city staff has with getting it done sooner? Assuming the rest of the board would like to see it sooner versus later.
Yeah, we generally get the numbers over to the FMPTF as soon as we can after the close of the fiscal year.
Okay, and
We
that
have to get
closes October 31st?
Yeah, shortly.
September
after-
30th.
September 30th, okay,
is the
so-
end of our fiscal year, so we get it shortly thereafter.
Okay.
Usually there is some reconciliation, a little bit of back and forth. And unfortunately, and Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even just a matter of a few days can end up really making a difference.
It can, because like I said, 95% of the plans that we work with have an October 1 fiscal year. So everybody is trying to get their data in that first 4 to 6 weeks after that date. And so, yes, if you come in on one day as opposed to 5 days later, there could be 20 or 30 plans that come in that interim that end up getting ahead of you in line.
So to summarize,
Like I said, I'm not saying we don't ever make exceptions for that. We certainly do every year. We do our best to have reports ready for specific pension board meetings. So, for example, in your case, if you have a
Chuck,
specific
actually,
pension board.
Chuck, is your question, is it related to budgeting purposes?
so my question is really, we're going to approve, I will vote to approve the plan. The data is so old to be making decisions off of it or to be looking at it. Our next meeting is in 3 months. So we're making decisions on data potentially 9 to 12 months after we see it. That's a long time. But what I'm hearing you say is if we just are able to supply data a week earlier, we may move up our reporting by a month, right?
That's correct.
Correct, but.
Okay, 'cause that's what you guys just said. I just want to
Yes.
make sure that's what I heard.
Yes, but that may not actually have much of an
Okay.
impact. And the reason why is, going back to what you said, we only meet every 3 months. So if you miss a meeting by a day, you might get your report 2 months earlier than you got it this year, but we still wouldn't be going over it until today. So the vast majority of boards don't actually go through their valuations like we are today until this spring meeting,
Okay.
generally.
So we could adjust our meeting schedule, though, depending on the availability of the report? There's no law against that, is there?
No, there's no law.
Okay.
I don't know if it has.
That would
any
have to be in front of the board would have to approve it. and-
Correct. And I don't know if that has any impact or value, not to say we can't. I don't know if that does anything to help anybody.
I would imagine we can get a copy of the report once it's prepared by the actuary. so
Absolutely.
Approval, so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you just couldn't
Okay, that's
approve
good.
it until.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, great, good.
Yeah, sometimes it depends on the timing of payroll. So if the payroll check date is September 30th, then there may be, 2 week, it may take us a couple weeks to go back and forth, as Jeremy mentioned. If the last payroll is September 24th, then there is an extra lead time that we have, to get that information reconciled and.
Got it, but unless, there's, Chuck, unless there's been a miscommunication on the difference a week makes, then it might be something that, if we were just cognizant of it as a deadline relative to our close schedule, we might even be able to pick up a couple months, depending on a 10-day, supplying information 10 days sooner. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next question.
And
for-
I would emphasize one last thing. Whenever the city does submit the data to the league, make sure that you emphasize or let the league know. I mean, normally, I guess, Jeremy, I don't know if you're the one setting up these meetings, but just make sure that there's good communication as to what the board is looking for, because even if you fell a little bit later in the schedule, if I know you have a meeting coming up and, and I'm looking at doing your report versus 10 or 15 others who don't have meetings coming up, I can easily do yours. Go ahead and get yours done so that we make sure we have it ready for that meeting. So just make sure there's good communication as far as timing and so forth, and remind the League of Cities, and then they will in turn remind me that, you're trying to get this thing as early as possible in the year.
I think just a draft report somewhat sooner than 6 months is all that I'm personally looking for.
Yeah.
Doesn't, to Terry's point, draft is close enough, right?
Yeah, we unfortunately we don't do drafts when we do the report, we do it for real. I mean, I know technically it is a draft until the board accepts it, but I'm saying we don't do like an initial preliminary report and then come back later and refine it in any way. It's kind of a one-shot deal, and that's part of. I won't say we don't do it for some of the big clients that specifically want that and pay for it, but for the regular plans and smaller plans, when we sit down to get these reports done, the report is done, and on our end, at least, the expectation is that that's it. It's kind of a one and done. Not to say we can't change it, but I'm just saying we don't generally produce, draft reports and then come back and refine it in any way.
And then my last question, which I'm sure everybody will be relieved about, is benefit expense is 2.75%. Can you tell me what benefit expense is? I know what the budget is for the board. I know what the fee, some of the fees are, but there seems to be a little bit of a delta relative to what those fees are and the benefit expenses. So if you could just explain to me what makes up benefit expense, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the benefit expense, or we sometimes call it the administrative expense, it's everything from, of course, your actuarial fees, legal fees, administrative cost fees. It's pretty much all of the expenses of the plan that are not investment fees or investment related. So, and typically those, I don't know that for FMPTF that any, Jeremy, do you know offhand if if there are any accounting fees included? I'm thinking no, because I think the city probably picks up any accounting costs, but
Yeah, no, our quarterly fees are inclusive of everything outside of the full service, but there is a separate line item for that.
right.
That's it.
And so
for
then
those are our
the only
fees.
add-on to that, I guess, would be, again, any legal expense above and beyond, for any, I guess, plan amendments or things of that nature, and then, or legal consultation, and then the actuarial fees. That's pretty much it, yes?
So that percentage seems kind of high then, because I'm looking at a breakdown of administrative expenses, and as a percentage of the fund, there's quite a bit of delta. So just for a future footnote, where do we get to the, we're using 2.75 in our calculations going forward, and
Well,
yet.
that's a load on the total projected liability, so that's a little different than saying that we're expecting our expenses to be 2.75. Certainly it doesn't mean it's 2.75% of payroll. The 2.75 is a load on projected liability, and so it's intended. What we're saying is that over time, between now and the life of the pension fund, that we expect the total administrative expenses to be about 2.75% of the total projected liability. So we do that as an add-on to that. And then, so we're basically increasing the total projected liability by 2.75%. Then the impact that adjustment has on the actual contribution dollars is going to vary from time to time. But so it's not saying that expenses are 2.75% of payroll or anything like that.
So it's not based on an actual, it's based on a load factor.
A load factor for future over time, the total. In other words, you can think of it as the proportion of the total money that the plan pays out over time. We expect about 2.75% of that to be admin expenses, and then the rest to be for actual benefit payments.
Okay, so who comes up with the 2.75%?
I do that. It is an assumption. So all assumptions are under the authority of the pension board. My role technically is advisory, but yes, I come up with that assumption just like I come up with all of the assumptions that I recommend, and then the board, can either accept or reject it, and certainly, we can use something else if the board feels like, a different assumption would be justified. But that it starts with me, the 2.75% load.
All right. Thank you very much, Chuck, for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you for
Yes,
being
sir.
patient with me.
Any other questions or for Chuck? Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate your time.
Okay, did you want to approve the report today, or do you want to maybe think about it some more, or?
I think if we want to approve it, we just need a motion to do so.
Motion to approve? the
Second.
Actual report?
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
There you
Got
go.
report.
All right. And then the other thing we need, I hate to keep taking up your time, is this is a housekeeping exercise, but you also, under state law, you separately have to approve the 6.75% interest rate assumption. And Jeremy, I'll let you give them the wording of that motion.
Sure, I can give you the words and you can so move it unless you have any questions. But again, as Chuck said, it's just a busy work exercise. We're
Even
not-
though we've approved that. in
Even
the
though we've
past.
approved it, so generally we
Yep.
just approve whatever was in the report, because the only other option is if we change it, the state's gonna come back and go, well, if you're if you're telling me you're gonna make this, but you used a different number in your report, so therefore we just go in line with the report, so it'd be 6.75%. So your expected rate of return of 6.75% for the next year, the next several years, and the long term thereafter. And like I said, unless you have any questions, you can just so move it.
So moved.
Second. Any questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
We're legal.
All
Approved.
right, thank you, guys. It was good chatting with you this morning. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, bye.
I just want
Okay,
to make sure you
so-
guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Pedro.
Okay, never mind.
Well-
Thank you.
Welcome.
I was here early. I tried to address that one legal question, but Chuck did a great job, so I didn't need to jump in. But
Okay, your volume is a little low, though. I don't know if that's on our
Okay.
side or your side.
I would think it might be on your side, but I'm adjusting my speaker here to see if that's a little bit better. Is that better? I can always speak louder, despite what my wife tells me.
It's about the same. So, Jeremy, do we need to
Better.
do anything with the GASB report, or that's part of
You don't, it's
the
a,
presentation?
that's more information, the city actually is who uses that.
Okay, it just wasn't on the budget, or on the agenda,
Yeah,
so,
it's not anything that you have to
okay. So then our
take any
next,
action on.
our next item is the quarterly pension plan investment report.
Okay. I'll go over your dollar amounts first, page 53. So this information will be as of December 31st. Your beginning balance was 9.1 million. You had 142,000 in contributions come in, had a really good earnings quarter, up 737,000. Paid out 22,500 in distributions, had 5,900 expenses. So your ending balance was $9,955,255.02. And then the next couple pages would just be the accounting for that. So any dollar-related questions before I touch on the investments? No? Okay. If you want to look at a quick overview, page 65 has that, but as I already alluded to, just a huge quarter in the market. So our first fiscal quarter, already up 7.93%, so we've essentially already exceeded our assumed rate of return. So if all else is equal and we can hold on, we're already in an incredibly strong spot. Just kind of carrying forward, because obviously we've already now had the March quarter end. We just don't have all of this report compiled yet. They're a couple weeks away from that. But I think we're going to add on the low end a couple more percent. I think it'll be better than that, but I'll shoot low and then come in higher, hopefully. So I think we're most likely in double digits, and hopefully even better than that through the March quarter. So just a huge start to the fiscal year. And then we'll see kind of what happens. It's a lot of the same information, and I don't want to bore you all too much with the details, even though I know we have some new trustees. But what we've talked about, and I'm sure everybody's aware of, is essentially everything that's driving the market. Now, a given day, you might get some news or something that swings the market, but generally speaking, it's inflation and what the Fed's doing or not doing with interest rates seems to really be guiding the market. So it's kind of an ad nauseum topic that we just keep talking about, and every time we think we're getting somewhere, which for the most part it's been rosy, the outlook overall, and that's why we've had such a huge couple quarters, that and the AI push that we saw, especially in that through the end of last year, that Magnificent Seven, as we've talked about, those 7 companies really positioned well and having huge returns from the AI boost. But that said, once again, we've gotten a sticky inflation report hanging around. We were starting the year, we're looking at maybe 6 cuts was kind of the betting favor, 6 rate cuts for this year. That's down to 3, and I would question whether or not we're going to see anytime soon. The June was hopeful, but I think that's probably going to go by the wayside, it appears, because again, we're in that weird conundrum of the economy is staying strong, consumer spending is staying strong, the job market's strong, and those are all bad things for inflation. So it's, you pick your poison. Do you want an economic slowdown, or do you want higher interest rates? It's kind of that weird conundrum that we've been in for really a couple of years now. Yeah, please, yeah. Oh, okay, there, yeah, sorry, there. So, but as I mentioned, you know, at least the next report is gonna be another good winning quarter. So that'll look good. Now, that said, last couple of days, we're seeing the markets kind of going, well, you know, maybe it doesn't look so good. I think it opened mostly flat, but slightly down this morning, I believe. I was already here, so I'm not 100% sure what it opened at, but it seems like we're, at least for the moment, we're having a little hiccup. You know, that said, a couple weeks ago, we were still sitting at or near all-time highs on most indices. So things continue to look good, but we continue to have those gray clouds. And then, of course, as everybody's very excited about, right, it's a presidential election year, and who doesn't get excited about that? So that's going to, of course, introduce, you know, by itself, that should create some volatility, especially over the next 6 months or so as we near the election. But that said, that's a real quick high review. I suspect we're going to have some conversations and questions. So I'm just going to stop there and see what you all want to talk about. And then I'll address some of the questions that we kind of already talked about asset allocation and performance of the fund, unless you want me to go right into that now, some comparative performance.
Any questions?
Okay.
Well, hold on a second. All right, so is there any way that we can get a little more definition as to, and I'm looking at, it's page 56 of the file, and it doesn't have a page number on it, but it's the a description of the 60% equity allocation, and it talks about 60% equity allocation, then it goes into the broad market, high-quality bond fund. So really just a couple of finer points I'd be interested in. So we summarize something called real estate. Well, as we know, residential real estate's booming. Commercial real estate, no. Usually within a real estate portfolio, you'll also have some retail. You'll also may have some, a newer thing is folks that specialize in long-term care facilities, retirement homes. So to have so much of our fund, our assets invested in that, we really, based on the descriptions, we really don't have an understanding of where our exposure is relative to the different real estate markets. And I'll reiterate my earlier point that real estate tends to be a very long-term, very good investment. I'd be interested in your thoughts as to how that lines up with the age of our retirees and where they're headed relative to their age of service. And then that same comment can be expanded to, you mentioned Magnificent Seven. We're not in a Magnificent Seven fund, right? When you say 60% equity allocation, that's very broad. It's not, it's a little misleading saying Magnificent Seven, because that's not what we're in. We're in a broader equity allocation across that based on, and there's some themes that go across these different funds. Right? So when you talk about high growth, well, small, mid-cap has a role in that. Large cap, as we see with companies like Tesla, Amazon, they have very high growth rates as well. So your descriptions based on the investments, in my personal perspective, is it leaves a lot to be desired, right? So I'd expect to see the first page of the Vanguard fund we're in, right? That we're invested in XYZ, these types of durations, everything like that. Same way with your bond fund. Are we 10-year investments? Are we 20-year? What's our What's our ratio between government, right? And then I also saw a table that said, and not to pile on, but just give you the bigger picture of what I'm thinking. I saw a table that said the expected return when you aggregate these funds is 4.63%, if memory serves me correct. Yet we're assuming a 7% return. So why the disconnect?
Well, that part, I don't know exactly, we'd have to go look at the table, but my guess is because that's they also then would add inflation in there to get most consultants. Let me back up a little bit. First of all, because this is especially for new trustees, and as your actuary was mentioning, you all are part of the Florida Municipal Pension Trust Fund, which has roughly $1 billion or so of pension assets. It's
How many
employees? How many employees?
Yeah.
So the trust fund actually has 0.
Well, no.
But the Florida League of Cities?
Yeah. How many firefighters are covered with us in the group?
How many I do not know the firefighter.
Okay, so how
breakdown.
many-
We have thousands and thousands of participants in the, I don't know the breakdown
Okay.
between police, fire, general employees.
Uh,
We have about, I'm sorry,
Just interested in, is it 70,000?
no.
700,000?
No, it'd be, oh boy, I hate.
I won't hold-
No, it's less.
Just
It's
say you'll
much
follow
lower.
up, just say you'll follow up.
I'll follow up.
Okay, great.
What was I gonna say? Yeah, so you're a part of that fund. Within that, you all do, as Chuck said, you all do have, as a board, you can make allocation decisions on the 50, 60, 70%. Those are what we offer, and that's equity allocation is those percentages. So right now, you're in 60, so 60% of it is in equities, 30% is in fixed income, 10% in real estate. It's 50% is 50, 40, 10, 70% is 70, 20, 10. So you get 10% real estate in all three funds, and then it's just that difference in fixed income versus equities is where you'll see the differential. So that, just to give you a little bit of back there. And then now, we have a consulting firm, Asset Consulting Group. They are a consultant for the entire pension trust fund. So they're not just Oldsmar's consultant, they're the consultant for the FMPTF fund. They are who comprises this entire report. So if you have questions or need to see things differently, I'm not the one who can just sit there and tell you right up front, oh, we can do this, we can do that. All I can do is go back and see what tweaks can be made. But now coming back to
So
some of your
they're
questions,
picking,
all
they're
of-
picking the, just clarification, they're picking the stocks and the fund, and the
They are
bonds.
not. They are just the consultant. So what they do as a consultant is so bigger picture again. We have an investment advisory committee that the Florida League of Cities has put together. We have financed, well, all of them have a finance background, have been finance directors along the way within the state of Florida public government. Some of them have since become maybe a city manager or something else, but they're all finance. So we have put that board together, and again, we call that our IEC, or Investment Advisory Committee. We meet usually on a quarterly basis as well. This consultant, Asset Consulting Group, they work with that Investment Advisory Committee. They determine investment strategy, asset allocations, targets, things along those lines. Then they're the ones who also initially worked with our committee to determine, they would bring in, hey, 2 or 3 managers that they believe for the different portfolios. They said, we believe these are really good managers to fit what we're looking for, investment style, so on and so forth. The Investment Advisory Committee ultimately is going to end up kind of making that decision. Now, that said, there is one more formal process, but they typically fall in line with whatever the recommendation is, which is we do have another board who ultimately makes the final decision. That's made up of elected officials around the state of Florida. But again, they're going to rely heavily on what the Investment Advisory Committee shares with them. So then that IEC group, working with the consultant, they're going to kind of determine the individual managers. So the consultant itself is just an advisory, and then we have individual different managers over these funds. And then that goes back into your points earlier. All of those things you were asking about, or 90+% of them, are in this report. They're just farther down. So each individual let's go to real estate, because you mentioned that a few times. So let me give you you'll have to bear with me for a second, because it is a large report. I call it, I like to joke that it's a cure for insomnia, this report. But let's see, well, I'm not there yet. Getting close. Okay, starting on page 128, has much more in-depth information on the real estate. So you're asking kind of, where the money is. You will see a breakdown of that on page 129. Has a pretty good breakdown there. This particular real estate manager, this is Morgan Stanley. I don't know if you're going to find well, first of all, it's core real estate. It is, it's nothing like a REIT or anything like that, which has become very popular. Their philosophy, their management philosophy is they focus heavily on rents for income, not necessarily asset appreciation. They don't do a lot of property flipping, property development. Not to say they never do any of those things, but they want 80+% of the income to come from rents, leases. That's the biggest thing they focus on. They want long-term, highly leased out properties that they're going to keep for a long time. They focus heavily on highly densely populated areas as well. And this manager has performed extremely well. They are a newer addition. I want to say let me see if I can go back up. 2018? I think it was 18. But to kind of give you an idea of their performance, typically what you'll see is if you add real estate, you pull from fixed income allocation. It provides a nice diversification. This particular manager, they're not as interest rate sensitive as other real estate funds and as fixed income is. And so that's one of the biggest reasons we went with them. And to kind of give you an impact, I've got to go back to page.
Might be the next page.
Well, no, I'm actually going to go back up to the total return page, page 65 and 66. So you can see this manager, we only have 5 years of returns so far because of, again, the newness to the portfolio. They've got a 5.26% return over the last 5 years. You go up to fixed income, which is where we pulled that 10% allocation from. You're looking at roughly, you've got a 77 basis point, a 41 basis point return over the last 5 years. So what is that? Give or take under 60 basis points. Now if we're being incredibly fair, fixed income had no chance for the last decade or more with, interest rates being at or near 0% essentially. So that put fixed income at an all-time headwind. And so if you're being realistic, that's a tough comparison. But that said, you can see that we're getting, even though there is more volatility in real estate, you're still getting a better return and you're getting good diversification over the fixed income.
So looking at their allocation, 50% is in office space and industrial combined.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm going to take your word for it because I was back up on another page.
Yeah,
So
32.10 is industrial and office is 16.60. So it's really 48.6%.
With industrial and warehousing growing and office, I would say that they're not looking to grow office currently, as that would come to no surprise to anybody.
Okay.
So hopefully that gives you a little better picture. Again, I know it sounds like you take a lot of interest in this, which is great. We could probably talk forever about it. But hopefully it gives you a little better insight as to what's going on and how these portfolios work. And then the real estate specifically and how it, I believe, has played a very good role in the overall fund. And then that said, that's why we are comfortable. Now, certainly the board could look to make a change at any point in time, as we've already talked about, to either a 70% equity or a 50% equity allocation, if you all felt the need. But right now, I wouldn't feel any need to make a recommendation that the board needs to change. But that said, that's certainly up to you all. And if you want some more data on that, I can provide some kind of performance differences.
I think we're in pretty good shape. It's just a matter of digging through all of the details.
There is a lot to dig through.
Yep.
So.
Question, does the advisor that is advising on the plan, are they, fiduciaries in the plan, do they acknowledge as fiduciary, or do they act in a 38 investment manager capacity, or is all that discretion given just to your overall manager, fund?
That's a great question, and the worst part is, and this is shame on me, so I'm going to get you, I haven't had anybody actually ask me that for a while, and I know the answer, but I'm just pausing for a moment. Let me just confirm, and I'll get back to you on if they are the legal aspect of it. I think I know the answer, but I'm second guessing myself because nobody's asked me that in a while.
Any other questions on the report?
Just a second. Your contract with the city of Oldsmar, what's the fee based on? And I haven't asked or looked at the contract that's in place.
Yeah, no, that's.
Assuming there is a contract.
There is, it's probably extremely old at this point. Our fees is a percentage base, on asset allocation, and I'll get you the specific breakdown. You can see, let's see, where's our expenses? So page 134. We're gonna cover, when we cover our expenses, in a little bit,
That's fine, you can cover it
the
then.
dollar amount. Well, but the actual breakdown, I don't, I'll have to get that. But essentially, it's tiered, so as your assets grow, our fees grow, but they grow at a much smaller rate. They actually cap at 50 million. So all of our plans above 50 million actually pay the same amount. That said, it's a good segue. I do want to let the board know, I don't think we've ever increased our fees. We've actually been able to lower them in the past where we've seen such good growth, and because it's based on a percentage of assets, we were actually able to lower the fees in the past. Given the state of the world over the last few years, we've been trying to hold out and hold out. I do think we're gonna have to make a fee increase request, probably maybe towards the end of this year. So that is just to let you all know now. I think what I've seen, and of course I'm biased and I'm in favor of us, but we generally operate at a much lower cost than probably anything you'll find out there. And we'll make sure that even with an increase, it still stays extremely lower than probably anything else you'll find. Our fee, just so you all know, the new trustees, so that covers administrative, so everything happening behind the scenes. It also does your consultant fee, which is typically the largest cost of a plan. The consultant fees covered in there, and then our blanking on the word, our custodial fees are also covered in there. So that essentially it includes everything but legal and actuarial.
Got it.
You're welcome.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the administrative budget report as of February 29, 24. And this is from the city for our budget.
This is, let me look to see. I think that, yeah, this one here, this is just informational. We just kind of keeping track throughout the year. At the end of the year, of course, we go back, and approve what our actuals are. But this is just letting you know kind of where we stand throughout the year.
Any questions? This shows the actuary, administrator, auditor, and legal fees. There are no questions? Okay. So the next item is ratification of expenses and distributions.
In the very next page. And that's just, these are, obviously, since we last met, these are any fees incurred.
Okay. So the board has previously given authorization for them to pay these as they come in. So we just have to review them and then approve them.
So our attorney fees look like they're on retainer on a monthly basis, so 12 months is the annual?
Yes.
Okay. And the FMPTF of $750 is?
Yeah, so that's a board administration, or what we call full service. This board actually just made the change it's been almost a year now, last June, okay. And that is, so I come to all the meetings. We record everything. Jessica Johnson, who you all did get emails from and will continue to, she's putting together the agenda. We're coordinating, making sure that we have quorums, everything's set up, so on and so forth.
That's a per meeting charge.
It's a per meeting charge. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that's the only additional service we have. Not, the vast majority of our plans use it, but it's not a requirement. Essentially, if you don't, then the city kind of just has to take that role of dealing with it all. And I think think they were happy to not have to do that anymore.
Just to clarify, this is a city expense and not a plan.
It's a plan expense. All expenses that come before this board are plan expenses, and pretty much every expense is a plan expense. Now, that said, it's a city expense ultimately, right? Because any costs that the plan bears are gonna find their way through, for instance, the expense load that we talked about in the actuary. So that goes into then determining contribution rates. So ultimately, the city's paying, but they are plan expenses. The plan writes the check. And then we didn't happen to have our quarterly fees. I guess it was just timing of when we billed for that. So normally you would see a quarterly fee dollar amount for us as well, and that's gonna be higher than 750. And so at the next meeting, you'll see that, or depending upon the timing, there could be two, since we didn't have one at this meeting.
And were we able to do the FPPTA or no? Okay. I just didn't see that on here, so,
I submitted it, so we'll probably see it in the next quarter.
okay. Thank you. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve expenses and distributions as presented.
I'll second.
Any other discussions or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is the House Bill 3 Comprehensive Report.
But it's just a memo, so it's just informational for the new trustees. I'll try to make it real brief because we had to talk about it a lot last year. There was a legislation change that happened last year, and we were kind of sorting through it all, what it said is essentially you can't use ESG or environmental social governance in determining how you make your investment choices. You could only use the word that they grasped hold of was pecuniary. So in other words, you could only make just good, sound financial decisions. You couldn't use your own personal beliefs in how you go about investing. Good news is none of our investment managers were doing that anyway. So we didn't have to make any changes other than there was some language and just plan documents to stay compliant that we'd do. And then the state did make it so that all defined benefit plans in the state had to fill out a compliance report at the end of the year. And then we do have to do it every other year going forward now. So every 2 years in December, we're going to do that. So we did that in this page, on page 140. It's just, we did end up getting a memo from the state just saying it was approved, which every plan was approved, so.
Thank you.
And you take care of that for us.
We took care of that, yes.
Okay. Next is the attorney update. Pedro.
Hi, good afternoon. Pedro Herrera. I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but we're the. I have also with me Madison. She's one of my colleagues at the firm, and we serve as your attorneys, as your legal counsel. I tried to jump in briefly with there was a question that was discussing with the actuary about potentially changing some of those optional forms of benefits. And I just wanted to just kind of close the loop on that, or reiterate that I agree with Chuck's comments, and I think one of the trustees was echoing that, and essentially the optional forms of benefits can be changed, provided they are actuarial equivalent, right? Obviously so there's nothing less that's being offered or provided rather to the participants. And then while I'm not the labor attorney, I would posit that there could be collective bargaining implications. So the firefighter union and the employer would potentially need to bargain over those changes to the forms of the benefits. So those would really be the only caveats to making that or changing the terms. But legally speaking, it can be done. So again, I don't want to belabor the point, but just wanted to close the loop on that. And any questions or anything on that? I'm sorry, I can't see you guys, so I'm just silence is golden, so that's okay.
No questions.
Okay. And so really the only thing I wanted to touch on, just update you guys on a couple of matters. First, just legislative update, as you guys are obviously aware. Florida legislative session ended, I guess, almost a month ago now at this point, 3 weeks perhaps, and really no changes were made that would affect our plan. There was potentially some language to the statutes that would have amended the Florida retirement system. Again, does not directly affect us, but it is significant for many folks in their other lives. So we always kind of want to just inform everybody of what's going on that front as well. But and most notably, it would have reinstituted a COLA that had been removed for certain members hired on or after July 1 of 2012. And some other goodies in that bill, but unfortunately it did not pass, and so really no legislation or no amendments are made or are being made that would affect any of the retirement plans. So just wanted to close the loop on that front. Also, I'm not certain if you've had a chance to review. We provided a brief special memo regarding Form 1 disclosures, financial disclosures. So for our newest trustees, and again, I apologize if you've already gone over this. I'm sure you guys have, but for our newest trustees, by virtue of your service on this board, you are technically considered a public official, and so therefore subject to state ethics laws. And so one of the requirements is that you, on an annual basis, file financial disclosure with the Ethics Commission. So to that end, typically these forms are due by July 1st, which remains the due date, except for when a member is leaving the board, which case they have 60 days to file, or when they first come on the board, and then in that case they have 30 days to file. But otherwise, July 1 is the date that most trustees would be filing by, and so the date remains the same. However, where you file that form and really how you complete the form have changed slightly. So we did want to address it, and I know we have some time, but we did want to give everybody a little bit of a runway, just in case there were questions or concerns or anything, because it is different. So first, let me address the where, right? So if you guys recall, and for our newer trustees, previously these forms were filed with the supervisor of elections in the county where you resided, right? And then in turn, the supervisor of elections office would file the forms with the State Ethics Commission. So as of January 1, that process has now changed, and they've eliminated the middleman, so to speak. And so now trustees will be filing directly with the State Ethics Commission through their online portal, through its website, essentially. And we provided the link that's there. You do have to create an account, right? So a username and a password. It's a little bit odd and obviously and cumbersome, but just takes a few minutes. And then presumably once you have that, for as long as you need to file, you'll have the same account information. And so the next time it'll certainly be easier. But that is a little bit of a pain. So obviously understand that. But if you have any questions or anything like that, you can always feel free to speak with me first and foremost. But we did also provide there's a telephone number there, which serves as a bit of a hotline, so to speak. There's also a brief tutorial video when you go onto the website itself. It's maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It does a nice job of explaining everything and kind of walking through the process. And then also the FPPTA, Florida Public Pension Trustees Association, is hosting 2 webinars. One of them was already done, and I think the next one is coming up now, I think on the 17th maybe. But that's directly with the director for the Ethics Commission. And I attended the first one, and she does a great job of explaining the differences and kind of answering questions. There is a Q&A period as well. So I imagine many of the trustees have the same questions, and so that could be a good avenue as well to answer or address any concerns you might have. But again, obviously, you can always give us a call, and we're happy to help and walk you through it. So the where has been addressed. Obviously, again, you're going to go through the portal, and then how you complete the form has also changed. So again, for the varsity folks, You used to have two methods where you could complete the form. You could either use a percentage basis, if the assets accounted for greater than 10% of your gross annual income, or you could use a dollar value threshold, right? So if the assets account for greater than $2,500 of your gross annual income. The percentage basis is no longer available, right? So again, as of January 1 this year and going forward, the only way to complete the form is to use that dollar value threshold. And so, again, if it exceeds that $2,500, you would have to include it as part of one of those four different categories, those four different buckets on that form. Just a question that I've gotten many times, and I just want to address that at first. You do not have to include the value, right? So let's say you have a brokerage account, right, and it would exceed $2,500 of your gross annual income. You don't have to include what the value of that brokerage account is, right? It's just if it's above the $2,500 threshold, you just have to list it. You just have to describe fidelity account, et cetera, right? So that's something that I've been asked often, and so I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody else had a similar concern. Kind of said a lot. I just want to take a pause. Are there any questions or anything? Any comments?
No questions, thank you.
No? Okay, good. And really that's all we had for our prepared remarks. I know if there's any questions of any of the board, obviously you can always give us a call. I did want to introduce Madison. I don't know if you can see her, but she's been with our firm for many years. And Madison, I don't know if you want to say a few words about yourself.
Just a quick hello. I've been with the firm for about 2 years now, shadowing Pedro at different meetings and handling, my own clients as well. So pleasure to meet all of you.
So I just wanted to introduce Madison, and she's going to be helping me, and so we're going to be attending your meetings going forward. But anything you need, obviously, you can always give us a call.
Thank you, Pedro, appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions for Pedro? Next item is just a review of our attendance trustee policy and trustee removal policy. And I think you guys received all this through the new trustee.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think we needed any action on that, just review of the policy. Yeah.
That's correct.
And you guys have been through this, you don't need me to read this, right? Any questions on the attendance policy? And then new trustee materials from the conference?
This was something that Jessica had, and just wanted to share. I think it was Cindy or one of you all, I think, had asked if we had any. This was some recent information that Jessica had from attending herself.
Okay, so just for information?
Yeah, it's just informational again for, well, I was going to say for new trustees, but really anybody may find it helpful. There's a lot to absorb hopping on a pension board, although it seems like a couple people may have some experience already in this area, but generally speaking, we see a lot of first timers and there's a lot to take in and absorb.
Lots to take in, yes.
Usually within 25 to 30 years, you get a pretty good handle on it.
Okay, so before we adjourn, I just want to say thank you and welcome to the new members. Appreciate the time that you've taken to part of our group. Anybody have any other agenda items you want to discuss or questions? Okay.
So if there's a topic we want to discuss as a board, it'll be public. Where or who should we submit agenda items to? Do they need to be approved by the board before discussion? How does that process
I would think that would go through Jessica.
Send it to Jessica.
Yeah.
Okay.
She'll put anything on she'll put almost anything on the agenda.
Okay.
I think
That's why I stopped myself. I was like,
Okay. Just need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Oh, thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you,
We'll
Pedro.
see you guys in the summer. We'll be there.
It is.
It's been on a timer.